"Get out of here!" she shouted. She was changing clothes when he entered the room and fell in love with her at first sight. "Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter's Stories. Heavenly God, you've experienced deep sorrow and grief. Thank you for understanding what I'm going through. Encourage me, Holy Spirit, that if Jesus made it through his suffering, I too can overcome with his strength. Lord, help me rise above these downcast feelings. I don't want to repeat each day, but since you are my family, I feel no hesitation in sharing what's on my mind. I work 16 to 18 hours a day creating content for you, but I've noticed that the response has been decreasing, and that's hard. Please, don't forget to like this video. It takes just 1 second, and it's a small prize for all the hard work I put into it. Now, on a lighter note, I've got to share this funny story about Binta. Yesterday, she was giving me the funniest look while reading through my comments. She said, "You're getting so many comments lately, and you're always talking about other people's affairs. Maybe someone's going to propose to you." I couldn't stop laughing. I said, "Binta, who would even want to propose to me? The only thing I'm getting proposed to is more content ideas." She didn't buy it. She kept joking, saying, "Oh, I see, you're just playing hard to get." But honestly, I don't know if anyone would be brave enough to love me with all my work and all the craziness that comes with it. Thank you for being here with me, my beautiful family. Your support means the world. Let's keep this journey going together. The fashion studio pulsed with the quiet energy of late afternoon when sunlight painted Manhattan's skyline in strokes of amber and gold. Sweet Queen's fingers danced across her tablet, making final adjustments to the sketches that would define next season's collection. At 27, she had already earned her reputation as one of the industry's rising stars, though few knew the sacrifices behind her success. The studio gradually emptied as designers and assistants trickled out, leaving behind the lingering scent of coffee and the whispered rustle of fabric samples. Sweet Queen remained, lost in the flow of creation, her dark eyes focused intently on the screen before her. Tonight was her sister Zara's engagement party, and she needed to look perfect, not for the social media photos that would inevitably flood Instagram, but for the proud smile she knew would light up her sister's face. The private fitting rooms were a privilege she rarely indulged in. As lead designer for the upcoming collection, she had earned the right to use them after hours. But Sweet Queen preferred to maintain professional boundaries. Tonight was different. The dress she had chosen, a creation she had poured her heart into during late-night sessions, hung waiting for her like a promise. She saved her work one final time, a habit ingrained from years of computer crashes at fashion school. The screen's blue light faded, leaving her in the warm embrace of sunset, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Sweet Queen stood, stretching muscles stiff from hours of focused work. Her reflection in the wall of mirrors showed a woman who commanded respect. Tailored blazer, natural hair styled in elaborate braids that spoke of her heritage, and eyes that held both determination and dreams. The fitting room beckoned, its frosted glass door slightly ajar. Sweet Queen gathered her dress and necessities, her heels clicking a steady rhythm across the polished concrete floor. The sound echoed in the empty studio, accompanied only by the distant hum of the city below. Inside the fitting room, the lighting was perfect, designed to flatter without deceiving, to reveal truth while maintaining mystery. Sweet Queen hung her dress carefully, smoothing invisible wrinkles from its surface. The fabric caught the light, and for a moment she allowed herself to remember the night spent perfecting each detail, each stitch a testament to her journey. She slipped off her blazer, carefully hanging it beside the dress. The day's tension began to melt away as she reached for the buttons of her blouse. Sweet Queen hummed softly, an old lullaby her mother used to sing, its melody carrying memories of warm nights and gentle hands braiding her hair. The door swung open, time fractured into crystalline moments, the sharp intake of breath, hers or his, she couldn't tell, the rustle of papers scattering to the floor, the reflection of shocked blue eyes meeting hers in the mirror. Rupert Franklin had been lost in quarterly reports, his mind swimming with acquisition numbers and market projections. He had walked these halls countless times, the path to his private office so familiar he could navigate it blindfolded. But tonight, distracted by projections that could make or break a dozen careers, he had turned left instead of right. Their eyes held in the mirror's reflection for what felt like eternity compressed into seconds. Sweet Queen saw a man whose presence filled the room, tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a suit that spoke of wealth without shouting it. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd run his hands through it in frustration, and his tie was loosened just enough to hint at the long day behind him. Rupert saw a warrior queen, proud and fierce, her beauty striking him with the force of a physical blow. But more than her beauty, it was the fire in her eyes that caught him. Defiance and dignity blazing together, the spell shattered. "Get out!" Sweet Queen's voice cracked like lightning through the shocked silence. She clutched her blouse closed, fury replacing surprise in her expression. Her free hand reached for the nearest object, a silk scarf worth more than most people's monthly rent. Rupert stumbled backward, his usual CEO composure deserting him completely. "I'm so sorry, I thought—" "Out!" The scarf whistled past his ear, followed by a designer shoe that missed his head by inches. His hasty retreat was accompanied by the sound of another projectile, likely its mate, hitting the door as it closed behind him. In the hallway, Rupert pressed his back against the wall, his heart racing in a way board meetings had never managed to provoke. The scattered papers from his dropped portfolio lay forgotten at his feet. He could still see her reflected in his mind. The curve of her neck, the flash of her eyes, the way she had stood her ground without a trace of the intimidation he was accustomed to seeing from employees. Inside the fitting room, Sweet Queen pressed her hands to her heated cheeks, anger and embarrassment warring for dominance. How dare he? The presumption of men who thought they owned every space they entered never ceased to amaze her. She glanced at her shoe lying near the door and couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. At least her aim was improving. She didn't know she had just thrown a limited edition Louboutin at one of the most powerful men in fashion. She didn't know that Rupert Franklin, CEO of Franklin Fashion Empire, had just felt his carefully ordered world tilt on its axis. She didn't know that he was still standing outside, gathering scattered papers with trembling hands, already knowing his life would never be quite the same. Sweet Queen retrieved her shoe, checking it for scuff marks before slipping it back on. The incident had rattled her more than she cared to admit, not because of the intrusion itself. She had dealt with entitled businessmen before, but because of something she had glimpsed in his eyes just before fury took over. Something that had looked remarkably like wonder. She shook off the thought and focused on preparing for her sister's party. The dress, when she finally put it on, transformed her as great fashion always does. Its lines spoke of strength and grace, of heritage and future combined. Looking in the mirror, Sweet Queen smiled, channeling her mother's favorite saying, "Stand tall, my queen. The world will rise to meet you." Outside, Rupert had finally collected himself and his papers, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. He stood in his private office, the one he had been aiming for originally, and looked out over the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. In 20 years of building his empire, no one had ever thrown a shoe at him. No one had looked at him with such unfiltered disdain, uncushioned by knowledge of his position or power. He had to know who she was. The security footage would tell him her name, her position, her entire employment history if he wanted. But something stopped him from reaching for the phone, from making that call. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Rupert Franklin wanted to earn something purely on his own merits. As night settled over Manhattan, Two people left the building separately, each unaware that their lives had just become inexorably intertwined. Sweet Queen headed to her sister's celebration, the memory of the intrusion already fading in anticipation of family joy. Rupert sat in his chauffeured car, a single designer shoe still vivid in his mind's eye, knowing sleep would be elusive tonight. The fashion studio settled into darkness, but energy lingered in the fitting room where fate had just rewritten two life stories. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Sweet Queen would find an elaborate apology bouquet on her desk, which she would donate to the children's hospital without reading the card. Rupert would spend an hour choosing that bouquet, only to learn his gesture had been redirected. The dance was just beginning. Their paths would cross again, in elevators and corridors, at meetings and events. Each encounter would add another thread to the tapestry of their story. But neither would ever forget this moment. The golden light of sunset, the shock of unexpected connection, and the perfect arc of a designer shoe through the air. Some might call it a meet cute. Others might see it as a professional faux pas. But in the years to come, they would both recognize it for what it truly was, the moment their hearts began beating to a new rhythm, even if they didn't know it yet. Chapter 2. Pride and Prejudice. Morning light spilled across the Franklin fashion empire's executive floor, casting long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Rupert Franklin stood at his usual spot, overlooking the city he'd helped shape. But his mind wasn't on the morning's acquisition reports or the quarterly projections awaiting his review. Instead, he kept seeing a pair of defiant eyes in a mirror, replaying the graceful arc of a designer shoe. His assistant Thalia's gentle knock barely registered. She entered with her usual efficiency, tablet in hand, ready to begin their morning briefing. One look at her boss's distracted expression made her pause. In 15 years of working for Rupert Franklin, she had never seen him quite like this. "Sir?" she ventured, after watching him stare unseeing at the Manhattan skyline for several minutes. "The board meeting starts in 20 minutes. Rupert turned, and Thalia nearly dropped her tablet at the uncharacteristic uncertainty in his expression. "I need you to find out something for me," he said slowly, choosing his words with unusual care. "Yesterday evening in the designer's fitting room on 12, there was an incident." Thalia's perfectly manicured fingers flew across her tablet, already pulling up security reports. "An incident, sir. There's nothing logged in the system." "There wouldn't be," Rupert said, a slight smile playing at his lips. "I didn't report it. I need to know who was authorized to use that room last night. But," he added quickly, seeing her prepare to make calls, "I don't want it to be an official inquiry, and I don't want her to know I asked." "Her?" Thalia's professional curiosity piqued. In all her years managing Rupert's professional and personal life, she had never seen him show interest in an employee. His brief engagement to Vesper had been a carefully orchestrated merger of old money families, ended by mutual agreement when both realized they were more in love with power than each other. "I can be discreet," Thalia assured him, already mentally cataloging the authorized users of the private fitting rooms. "May I ask what happened?" "For context," she added smoothly, seeing his hesitation. Rupert absently straightened his tie, Italian silk perfectly coordinated with his bespoke suit. "I may have accidentally walked in on someone changing, and she may have thrown a shoe at my head." The tablet clattered to the floor. Thalia's recovery was admirable, but not quite quick enough to hide her shock. "She threw a shoe at the CEO of Franklin Fashion Empire." "She didn't know who I was," Rupert said, and the smile playing around his mouth grew warmer. "Still doesn't, I imagine. That's what made it—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Refreshing." Across the building, Sweet Queen was having a very different morning. The massive bouquet on her desk drew every eye in the open-plan design studio. Roses, orchids, and lilies competed for attention, their fragrance overwhelming in the air-conditioned space. "Someone's got an admirer," teased Aisha, her best friend and fellow designer, perching on the edge of Sweet Queen's desk. "Want to tell me what you've been up to?" Sweet Queen barely glanced at the flowers, focused instead on her latest sketches. The previous night's anger had transformed into creative energy, and her designs crackled with a new intensity. "Probably another entitled businessman who doesn't understand personal boundaries," she muttered, adding a particularly aggressive flourish to her sketch. Aisha plucked the card from among the blooms, but Sweet Queen snatched it before she could open it. Without reading it, she dropped it into her drawer. "The children's hospital can use some cheering up," she decided, already reaching for her phone to arrange delivery. "You're not even curious?" Aisha demanded, watching her friend efficiently organize the flowers' removal. "Those are $1,000 blooms, Sweet. Someone's trying very hard to apologize for something." Sweet Queen's pencil paused mid-stroke. For a moment she remembered the look in the intruder's eyes. That split second before recognition had turned to shock. There had been something there, something that had made her heart skip a beat before anger took over. She pushed the memory away. "If he wanted to apologize, he could have done it in person," she said firmly, returning to her work. "Instead, he throws money at the problem and expects it to go away. Typical." In his corner office, Rupert was finding it impossible to focus on the board meeting. Words like market share and profit margins washed over him while his mind kept returning to the fitting room. Kai, his CFO and oldest friend, noticed his distraction and smoothly took over the presentation. Later, in the privacy of Rupert's office, Kai confronted him. "All right, what's going on?" "I haven't seen you this distracted since our boarding school days when you fell for that French exchange student." Rupert loosened his tie, dropping into his leather chair with uncharacteristic informality. "I met someone," he admitted. "Or rather, I barged in on someone, and she threw a shoe at me." Kai's laughter echoed through the office. "Please tell me there's security footage." "There is, but I'm not using it," Rupert said firmly. "I want to know who she is, but not like that, not by throwing my position around." Kai's amusement faded into genuine curiosity. "You, Rupert Franklin, are choosing not to use your considerable resources. This must be serious." "It's not..." Rupert began, then stopped. What was it? One interrupted moment, one flash of genuine emotion in a world usually carefully calculated. "She didn't know who I was," he said finally. "Do you know how long it's been since someone looked at me and just saw me?" Understanding dawned in Kai's eyes. As Rupert's friend since childhood, he had watched wealth and responsibility reshape the once carefree boy into the powerful but isolated man before him. "So what's the plan?" "I sent flowers," Rupert admitted. "Rookie mistake," Kai groaned. "Let me guess. Expensive, overwhelming, probably scared her off completely." Before Rupert could respond, Thalia appeared in the doorway. "Sir, those flowers you sent, they've been donated to Metropolitan Children's Hospital. The recipient didn't read the card." Kai's laughter started again, but Rupert felt something else, respect and a growing certainty that he had stumbled onto something extraordinary. Someone who would throw a shoe at a presumed intruder, then donate expensive apology flowers without a second thought, was someone worth knowing. The day progressed and news of the mysterious bouquet traveled through office gossip channels. It reached Vesper during her lunch meeting with fellow socialites. Her perfectly painted lips tightened at the news that her ex-fiancé was sending extravagant flowers to unknown women. "Find out who she is," she instructed her assistant Cyrus, who had been hovering nearby. "I want to know everything." Meanwhile, Sweet Queen was immersed in her work, unaware of the ripples her actions had caused. Her latest collection was pushing boundaries, combining traditional African patterns with modern silhouettes in ways that made fashion critics take notice. She had fought too hard for her position to let one unsettling encounter distract her, but when she passed the fitting room later that day, her steps slowed. The evening light was the same, golden and warm. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember not the intrusion, but that first startled moment when their eyes had met in the mirror. There had been something there, something that had nothing to do with privilege or position. She shook off the thought and continued walking. She had no time for entitled businessmen, no matter how striking their eyes or how genuine their surprise had seemed. Her mother had taught her to value actions over appearances, and so far, his actions spoke of someone used to buying his way out of problems. What she didn't know was that at that exact moment, Rupert was sitting in his office, planning something entirely different. The flowers had been a mistake, an automatic response born from years of solving problems with money. But now, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold, he was forming a new plan. If she valued actions over words, then actions would speak for him. But first, he had to find a way to meet her again, this time as equals. Not as an intruder, not as a CEO, but as a man who had glimpsed something remarkable in a chance encounter. The fashion studio hummed with end-of-day activity. Designers and assistants gathering their things, discussing projects and deadlines. Sweet Queen stayed late again, losing herself in the flow of creation. She didn't notice the figure that paused briefly by her desk, didn't see the small origami crane left beside her sketchbook, a simple thing made from ordinary paper carrying a weightier message than any expensive flower ever could. Tomorrow, she would find it. Tomorrow, their story would take another turn. But for now, they moved in their separate orbits, each carrying the memory of that golden evening when a chance encounter and a thrown shoe had set something extraordinary in motion. Chapter 3. The Mistaken Proposal. The annual Franklin Fashion Empire Gala transformed the Metropolitan Museum's rooftop garden into a wonderland of lights and luxury. Crystal chandeliers suspended from invisible wires created constellations above the city skyline. The air hummed with string quartets and the musical chatter of Manhattan's elite, all gathered to celebrate the company's most successful year to date. Sweet Queen stood before a mirror in the preparation area, making final adjustments to her masterpiece. The collection she had designed for tonight's showcase defied conventional fashion boundaries. Traditional African patterns danced across modern silhouettes, each piece telling a story of heritage embracing future. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed invisible wrinkles from the showstopper, a gown that had haunted her dreams for months until she finally captured its essence on paper. "They're going to remember this night," Aisha said softly, appearing beside her friend with 2 champagne flutes. "They're going to remember you." Sweet Queen accepted the champagne but didn't drink. Her mind was already racing ahead to the showcase, mentally reviewing every detail. The past month had been a blur of preparation, mysterious origami cranes appearing on her desk each morning, and an odd tension whenever she passed certain executives in the hallway. She had steadfastly ignored both the paper cranes and the lingering glances, focusing instead on tonight's collection. Across the venue, Rupert Franklin was having a markedly different experience of the evening. He stood in his private office adjacent to the rooftop, adjusting his bow tie for the 10th time, while Kai watched with poorly concealed amusement. "You know," Kai observed, swirling his scotch, "for someone who regularly closes $100 million deals without breaking a sweat, you're remarkably nervous about a fashion show." "This is different," Rupert muttered, giving up on the tie. "Did you see the preview of her collection?" "Ah, yes, the mysterious designer whose name you won't tell me," Kai grinned. "The one you've been leaving paper cranes for like a lovesick teenager." "I haven't signed them," Rupert protested weakly. "She doesn't know they're from me." "Right, because there are so many origami-obsessed executives in this building." Kai set down his glass and approached his friend. "Look, I've known you since boarding school. I've seen you build this empire from the ground up, but I've never seen you like this over anyone. What makes her different?" Rupert turned to the window, watching the glittering crowd below. "She sees me," he said simply. "Not the CEO, not the Franklin fortune, just me. Even if she's mostly seeing me as an annoyance right now." "The shoe incident remains legendary," Kai chuckled, straightening Rupert's tie with practiced ease. "Though I notice you've been very careful to knock on doors since then." Below, the gala was in full swing. Sweet Queen's models were lined up, each one a vision of her artistic vision made real. She moved among them, making minute adjustments, whispering words of encouragement. This collection represented everything she had fought for. Recognition of her heritage, proof that high fashion could tell deeper stories than mere luxury. Vesper arrived fashionably late, turning heads in a dress that cost more than most people's annual salary. Her calculating eyes swept the crowd, noting allies and enemies with equal precision. Cyrus materialized at her elbow, tablet in hand. "The designer you asked about," he murmured. "Sweet Queen, rising star in the design department, immigrant background, scholarship to fashion school, earned her position through talent rather than connections." His lip curled slightly at the last part. "How quaint." Vesper's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And Rupert's interest in her?" "Nothing official, but he's been watching her. The flowers last month, the paper cranes on her desk. He's clearly infatuated." "Rupert doesn't do infatuation." Vesper's perfectly manicured nails tapped her champagne glass. "He does strategy. Whatever game he's playing, I want to know why." The lights dimmed, signaling the start of the showcase. Sweet Queen's heart pounded as the first model stepped onto the runway. The audience's initial murmur of appreciation grew into genuine excitement as each piece revealed itself. Her modern interpretation of traditional patterns told stories of migration, of roots and wings, of past and future intertwined. Rupert watched from the shadows, not seeing the clothes so much as the vision behind them. Each design spoke of courage, of breaking boundaries while honoring tradition. He recognized in them the same fire he'd seen in her eyes that first evening. The final piece, Sweet Queen's masterwork, drew audible gasps. The model seemed to float, wrapped in a story told in fabric and light. Even Vesper couldn't maintain her mask of indifference. As applause thundered through the venue, Sweet Queen slipped away from the chaos backstage. She needed air, space to process the emotion of seeing her dreams made real. The rooftop garden's quiet corner offered sanctuary, the city lights below, a glittering carpet at her feet. Unknown to her, Rupert had come to the same decision. The weight of the small box in his pocket had been distracting him all evening. The paper crane inside, his most intricate yet, carried words he had been trying to say for weeks. He spotted what he thought were her signature braids in the garden's soft lighting. His heart pounding, Rupert approached quietly. This was his moment, away from the crowds and pretense. He would finally tell her who he was, what she had come to mean to him. The paper crane in his pocket carried not just an invitation to dinner, but an admission of his identity and an explanation for his subterfuge. Taking a deep breath, he dropped to one knee behind the figure. "I've been trying to find the right words," he began, his voice soft with emotion. "From the moment you threw that shoe at me, I knew you were different, special. Would you do me the honor of having dinner with me? I have so much to tell you." A distinctly unfamiliar giggle made his eyes snap open. Horror dawned as he realized he was proposing to Maven from accounting, while Sweet Queen's unmistakable laughter rang out from the corner. "Wrong girl, Mr. CEO," she called out, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. It was the first time he'd seen her real smile, and even in his mortification, it took his breath away. Maven's confusion shifted to understanding, then amusement. "I'm flattered, Mr. Franklin," she managed between giggles, "but I think you meant this for someone else." Rupert stood, his face burning. Sweet Queen approached them, still fighting laughter. "I have to admit," she said, eyes dancing with mischief, "your aim is worse than mine. At least I hit what I was throwing at." "I suppose I deserve that," Rupert admitted, finding himself smiling despite his embarrassment. "Though in my defense, it's dark out here." "Is that your excuse for the fitting room too?" Sweet Queen's eyebrow arched perfectly. "Poor lighting?" Maven discreetly slipped away, leaving them alone in the garden. The city hummed below, a distant symphony of life and light. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, the humor of the situation dissolving the tension of past weeks. "The paper cranes were from you," Sweet Queen said finally. It wasn't a question. "Yes, and you're the CEO." "Also yes." "You could have just said something," she pointed out, "instead of this elaborate—" She waved her hand, encompassing the evening, the mistaken proposal, everything. "Would you have given me a chance?" Rupert asked quietly. "If I had introduced myself as the CEO after the fitting room incident?" Sweet Queen considered this, remembering her automatic rejection of the flowers, her assumptions about entitled businessmen. "Probably not," she admitted, "so I tried something different." Rupert pulled the small box from his pocket, offering it to her. No grand gestures, no expensive flowers, just paper and patience. Sweet Queen opened the box, finding the most intricate crane yet. Its wings were decorated with tiny patterns that echoed her designs. When she carefully unfolded it, she found not just words, but a sketch, clearly amateur but heartfelt, of her throwing that first shoe. "You've been practicing," she observed, touching the patterns gently. "I had a good inspiration," Rupert smiled. "Though I think I'll stick to business and leave the real designing to you. Your collection tonight, it was extraordinary." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with possibility. The garden lights twinkled like stars, and somewhere below, the city continued its eternal dance. But in that moment, they existed in their own world, where titles and positions meant less than paper cranes and thrown shoes. "Have dinner with me," Rupert said finally, "not because I'm the CEO, but because you make me want to be better. Because you saw me as just a man who needed a lesson in knocking, and that's the most genuine interaction I've had in years." Sweet Queen looked at him thoughtfully, seeing past the designer suit and CEO polish to the man who had spent weeks making paper cranes just to make her smile. "On one condition," she said finally. "Name it. You have to let me tell the story of tonight's proposal at every company party for the next 10 years. Rupert's laughter joined hers, floating out over the city like a promise. "Deal. Though in my defense, Maven really does have similar braids." "Keep digging that hole, Mr. CEO," Sweet Queen grinned. "I'm sure it'll help your case." From her vantage point near the bar, Vesper watched their interaction with narrowed eyes. This was not strategy or business. The way Rupert looked at the designer was something she had never seen during their engagement. Something real and therefore dangerous. "Find out everything," she hissed to Cyrus. "Every secret, every weakness. If Rupert wants to play in the dirt with scholarship girls, we'll make sure. He remembers why people like us stick together." But her plotting went unnoticed by the couple in the garden. They had begun walking together, talking about everything and nothing, origami techniques and design inspiration, childhood dreams and future hopes. The night air was cool, but neither felt it. They were too wrapped up in the warmth of new beginnings, of barriers breaking down, of something real growing from a chance encounter and a thrown shoe. The gala continued below, celebrating success and luxury. But the real celebration was happening in a quiet corner of the garden, where a CEO and a designer were learning that sometimes the best stories start with mistaken identities and imperfect proposals, with paper cranes and genuine laughter. The night stretched ahead of them, full of possibility. Neither knew that forces were already aligning against them, that their journey would face obstacles beyond mistaken proposals and cultural differences. But in that moment, under the stars and city lights, none of that mattered. What mattered was the way she smiled when he admitted to practicing origami for weeks just to impress her. What mattered was how he looked at her. Not as a CEO viewing an employee, but as a man seeing his future unfold in unexpected and wonderful ways. Sometimes love stories begin with grand gestures and perfect moments, but sometimes the best ones start with thrown shoes and paper cranes, with mistaken proposals and genuine laughter. Sometimes the most perfect moments are the imperfect ones, where masks slip and real connections bloom in the space between who we are and who we pretend to be. As they walked together through the garden, sharing stories and laughter, they were writing the beginning of their own unique love story. One that would be tested by prejudice and privilege, by past wounds and present fears, but would ultimately prove that true connection transcends titles and traditions. The paper crane in Sweet Queen's pocket crinkled softly as she walked, a reminder that sometimes the simplest gestures carry the most profound meanings. And somewhere in the city below, a single shoe sat in a CEO's office drawer, a testament to the moment when life had thrown him the most unexpected and wonderful curveball of all. Chapter 4. Walls Coming Down. The morning after the gala dawned bright and crisp, Manhattan's skyline sharp against an October sky. Sweet Queen arrived early at her sister Zara's community center, arms full of fabric scraps and design supplies. Teaching art to children had become her sanctuary, a way to honor her mother's legacy while staying grounded in a world of high fashion and corporate politics. The center's walls, painted in vibrant murals by local artists, welcomed her like an old friend. She could almost hear her mother's voice, "Art heals, my queen. It builds bridges between hearts." The memory brought both comfort and a twinge of grief. It had been 5 years since cancer had taken her mother, but some days the loss felt fresh as yesterday. She was setting up the art supplies when familiar footsteps echoed in the hallway. Zara appeared, her traditional head wrap a splash of color against her nurse's scrubs. One look at her sister's face told her everything. "So," Zara said, eyes twinkling, "I hear someone had an interesting evening with the CEO." Sweet Queen focused intently on arranging colored pencils. "News travels fast. Sister, you're trending on fashion Twitter. Unknown designer revolutionizes Franklin Fashion Gala, though they left out the part about the CEO's romantic garden proposal to the wrong person." "It wasn't a proposal," Sweet Queen protested, but she couldn't help smiling at the memory. "And how do you even know about that part?" "Maven from accounting is my patient's cousin. Hospital gossip is better than CNN." Zara perched on a nearby table. "What I want to know is how you went from throwing shoes at him to sharing midnight garden walks." Before Sweet Queen could respond, a small whirlwind burst into the room. 6-year-old Amara, their star art student, rushed in with excitement radiating from every curl. "Miss Queen, did you bring more pretty fabric today? Can we make butterflies like last time?" Sweet Queen welcomed the interruption, scooping Amara into a hug. "Even better, today we're learning origami." She didn't notice Zara's knowing smile at her choice of art project. Across town, Rupert Franklin was having a significantly less peaceful morning. His office buzzed with post-gala meetings, but his mind kept drifting to the garden, to genuine laughter and unfolded paper cranes. "The board is concerned," Thalia reported, interrupting his reverie. "About your personal interest in a junior employee." Rupert's jaw tightened. "Sweet Queen is hardly junior. Her collection last night will revolutionize our entire next season." "That's not their concern." Thalia's voice was gentle. Vesper's father sits on the board. He's been asking questions about company hierarchy, about maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. Appropriate professional boundaries? Rupert's laugh held no humor. Like the arranged merger they tried to orchestrate with that engagement. I'm just delivering the message, sir. Thalia hesitated. There's more. Vesper has been seen meeting with our biggest competitors. If she's sharing insider knowledge, she wouldn't dare. But even as he said it, Rupert remembered Vesper's eyes when he'd ended their engagement. The calculation there, the cold fury beneath her polite smile. A text from Kai provided a welcome interruption. Community Center on 34th. Thank me later. Rupert didn't question how his friend had obtained this information. 20 minutes later, his driver pulled up outside a bright building covered in murals. He heard laughter floating from an open window, and something drew him toward the sound. The scene that greeted him through the classroom door stopped him in his tracks. Sweet Queen moved among a group of children, helping small hands fold paper into delicate shapes. Her smile was different here, unguarded, radiant. She wore simple jeans and a blouse made from traditional African fabric, yet she looked more regal than she had in designer clothes at the gala. Are you going to stand there all day? Or would you like to learn something useful? He started at her voice, realizing she'd spotted him. The children looked up curiously as he entered, but Sweet Queen's next words erased any awkwardness. Everyone, this is my friend Rupert. He's actually quite good at origami. Maybe if we ask nicely, he'll show us his special crane fold. A chorus of excited voices rose, and Rupert found himself pulled into their circle. His custom suit was decidedly out of place among paint splatters and glue sticks, but something in him relaxed as he sat cross-legged on the floor. I thought you said he was your boyfriend, Amara Stage whispered to Sweet Queen, making both adults flush. I thought you said he was the man who didn't know how to knock, another child added helpfully. Sweet Queen's laugh joined the children's giggles. Sometimes people can be more than one thing, she said diplomatically, but her eyes met Rupert's with warmth. They spent the morning teaching origami, and Rupert discovered parts of himself he'd forgotten existed. The children's joy in simple paper folds reminded him of afternoons with his grandfather before boarding school, and family expectations had reshaped his world. During a brief break, Zara appeared with coffee. Her assessment of the CEO was both thorough and subtle, noting how he helped the smallest children without condescension, how his eyes followed her sister with genuine appreciation rather than possession. Our mother started this program, she told him quietly. Art therapy for kids who needed a safe space. Sweet Queen keeps it going, even with her crazy schedule. She's remarkable, Rupert said simply, watching Sweet Queen help Amara perfect a paper butterfly. She is, Zara agreed. She's also had her heart broken before, by people who claimed to love her talent, but really wanted to own it, to reshape it into something more commercially viable. The warning was clear, but before Rupert could respond, his phone buzzed. Thalia's message was urgent. Emergency board meeting called. Vesper's father making waves. Need you back now. Reality crashed back. He looked at Sweet Queen, now teaching the children a simple dance to go with their paper creations, and felt worlds colliding. She caught his expression and nodded understanding. Go. Save your empire. Have dinner with me tonight, he asked quietly. There's something I need to tell you. Her eyes searched his face. Is this where you finally explain why the CEO of Franklin Fashion Empire has been leaving paper cranes on a designer's desk? Among other things, he forced himself to be honest. Things are complicated, more than I wanted them to be. Life usually is, she smiled slightly. Text me the details. I promise not to throw any shoes this time. The board meeting was every bit as unpleasant as expected. Vesper's father raised concerns about maintaining standards and appropriate relationships within the corporate structure. The implications were clear and infuriating. But sitting in his office afterward, Rupert felt oddly peaceful. The morning's simplicity, paper folds and children's laughter, Sweet Queen's unguarded smile, had reminded him of what really mattered. He began folding paper, muscle memory taking over as he created something new. Not a crane this time, but a butterfly, like the ones the children had made. By the time evening came, he had a plan. Sweet Queen arrived at the address he'd texted to find not a fancy restaurant, but a small ramen shop she'd once mentioned loving. Rupert waited outside, his suit exchanged for simple slacks and a sweater. "No designer labels," she teased. "The fashion world would be shocked." "I thought tonight could be just us," he said simply. "No titles, no expectations. Just two people who met because one of them needs lessons in knocking." Sweet Queen felt the last of her walls crumbling. "I'd like that." Over steaming bowls of ramen they talked. Really talked. About growing up between cultures, about mothers who shaped them and fathers who didn't understand them. About dreams bigger than inheritance and passion stronger than privilege. "Vesper's father is trying to force me out," Rupert admitted finally. "They never forgave me for ending the engagement. If they can prove I'm compromising company ethics by dating an employee." "Is that what this is?" Sweet Queen's voice was carefully neutral. "Dating?" Rupert reached across the table, his hand finding hers. "This is me finally meeting someone who makes me want to be better, who reminds me why I loved fashion in the first place, not for profit margins, but for the way it lets people tell their stories." Thunder rolled outside, and rain began falling. Sweet Queen's eyes lit up with mischief. "Do you dance, CEO?" "Here, now, it's pouring." But she was already pulling him outside into the warm summer rain. Other diners watched through the windows as they swayed together on the sidewalk, her laughter mingling with the sound of falling rain. Vesper, driving past in her luxury car, saw them dancing. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into her palms as she watched Rupert spin Sweet Queen under the streetlights, both of them soaked and laughing. "It's time," she texted Cyrus. "Start the plan." But for that moment, in the rain-washed night, Sweet Queen and Rupert were wrapped in their own world. A world where paper butterflies and honest hearts mattered more than board meetings and social expectations. Where walls built by hurt and privilege could come down, one origami fold at a time. Their first kiss tasted of rain and possibility. Above them, the city lights blurred into stars, and somewhere Sweet Queen swore she could hear her mother's laughter, blessing this unexpected, wonderful thing growing between them. Later, they would face the storms gathering on their horizon. But for now, they danced in the rain, two souls finding home in each other's arms, while paper butterflies waited in their pockets like promises of flight. Chapter 5. Dancing in the Rain. The weeks following their rain-soaked dance transformed Manhattan into a different city for Sweet Queen and Rupert. Every corner held potential for new discoveries. Every moment together peeled away another layer of their carefully constructed facades. Their courtship was a dance of contrasts. Power lunches traded for food truck adventures, designer boutiques abandoned for vintage markets, where Sweet Queen taught Rupert to see beauty in imperfection. One particularly memorable evening found them in Sweet Queen's tiny apartment, takeout containers scattered across her design table. Rupert sat cross-legged on her worn couch, his Italian leather shoes discarded, watching her sketch with fierce concentration. "You scrunch your nose when you're really focused," he observed, earning a playful glare. "It's adorable." "I do not scrunch," Sweet Queen protested, but her fingers unconsciously touched her nose. "I'm expressing artistic intensity." "Absolutely. Very intense scrunching." She threw a pencil at him with practiced aim. "You're lucky I'm out of shoes." The easy banter masked deeper currents. Sweet Queen's apartment told stories that her words didn't. The carefully preserved sewing machine that had belonged to her mother, photographs of her homeland mixed with fashion magazine cutouts, sketchbooks filled with dreams in progress. Rupert absorbed every detail, understanding that she was letting him see parts of herself usually kept private. At the office, they maintained professional distance, though rumors flew faster than design sketches. Sweet Queen's collection had become the talk of the industry, and she threw herself into preparations for Fashion Week. Rupert found excuses to attend design meetings, his suggestions surprisingly insightful. "You actually understand fashion," Sweet Queen accused one evening as they walked through Central Park. "Why do you pretend to be just a businessman?" Rupert was quiet for a moment, watching leaves dance in the autumn breeze. "My grandfather was a tailor," he admitted. "Before he became a janitor at my father's company, he taught me about fabric, about the way clothes could tell stories. Father said it wasn't appropriate knowledge for a Franklin heir." Sweet Queen laced her fingers through his. "Tell me about him." They found a bench, and Rupert shared stories he hadn't told anyone, about secret sewing lessons in the mansion's servants' quarters, about the joy of creating something with his hands, about the day his father discovered them and sent his grandfather away. "That's why you recognize the patterns in my designs," Sweet Queen realized. "You've been reading clothes stories all along. Yours tell the most beautiful stories I've ever seen." Their kiss tasted of shared understanding and healing old wounds, but storm clouds were gathering. Vesper's carefully orchestrated plan was taking shape, though neither Sweet Queen nor Rupert noticed the shadows yet. They were too absorbed in their growing connection, in the way their different worlds were weaving together into something new and precious. Kai noticed, though. He watched his friend transform, the weight of expectations lifting from Rupert's shoulders. During their weekly squash games, Rupert actually laughed, real unguarded laughter that echoed through the private club. "The board's getting nervous," Kai warned between sets. "Your happiness is making them uncomfortable. Happy CEOs are harder to control." "Let them squirm," Rupert returned a particularly vicious serve. "The company's performance has never been better." "It's not about performance. Vesper's been meeting with Thorn Industries." The ball slammed into the wall with unnecessary force. Thorn was their biggest competitor, always looking for weakness to exploit. "She wouldn't dare, wouldn't she?" Kai's voice was gentle. "You know what she's capable of when she feels slighted." Across town, Sweet Queen was facing her own warnings. Aisha cornered her in the design studio, concern written across her features. "Something's happening," she murmured, glancing around to ensure privacy. "Cyrus has been asking questions about your early designs, about your scholarship application." "Let him ask," Sweet Queen continued sketching. "Everything was legal and documented." "That's not..." Aisha hesitated. "Sweet, you know how this industry works. They don't need facts to destroy someone. Just rumors." Sweet Queen's pencil paused. She remembered other talented designers broken by whisper campaigns, by suddenly withdrawn opportunities. But before worry could take root, her phone buzzed with a message from Rupert. "Wear comfortable shoes tonight. Trust me." That evening found them in an empty dance studio, moonlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, and Rupert held out his hand with a smile. "I thought it was time I learned to dance properly," he said, "since someone likes impromptu rain performances." Sweet Queen kicked off her heels, padding across wooden floors, warmed by day's lingering heat. "My mother always said dancing was praying with your feet. Then teach me how to pray." They moved together, Sweet Queen guiding Rupert through steps her mother had taught her. She hummed along with the music, adding fragments of songs from her childhood. Gradually, their movements found harmony, two rhythms blending into one. "Tell me about her," Rupert murmured against her hair. "Your mother." Sweet Queen's voice painted pictures as they danced, of a woman who saw beauty everywhere, who taught art to children even while fighting cancer, who believed fashion could build bridges between worlds, of the legacy Sweet Queen carried in every design, every stitch. "She would have liked you," she said softly, once she finished scolding you about the fitting room incident. "I'm never living that down, am I? Not in this lifetime." Their laughter echoed through the empty studio, a counterpoint to the jazz still playing softly. They danced until the moon set, sharing stories and dreams, neither noticing the figure watching from the street below. Vesper lowered her phone, the photos she'd taken already uploading to a secure server. "Time to remind everyone why we don't mix business with pleasure," she texted Cyrus. The next morning, Sweet Queen arrived at her desk to find it cleared. Security stood nearby, faces carefully blank. Cyrus approached with false sympathy. "There are some questions about your early work," he began, but Aisha interrupted, bursting into the office. "Sweet, the Thorn Industries story, they're saying..." But Sweet Queen had already seen the headlines on her phone. "Rising designer's success, questioned. Sources allege stolen designs, falsified documents." The studio fell silent, all eyes on her. In that moment, Sweet Queen heard her mother's voice. "Stand tall, my queen. Truth has its own power." She gathered her sketches with deliberate calm, head high. Let them whisper, let them scheme. She knew who she was, what she had built. No one could take that from her. But when Rupert burst into the studio 10 minutes later, she was gone. On his desk, he found a single paper crane, the first one he'd ever made for her. Inside, her handwriting flowed across the delicate folds. "Some storms we have to weather alone. Take care of your empire. I'll take care of mine." The rain that had once made them dance now fell like tears against Manhattan's windows. But neither Sweet Queen nor Rupert believed this was their ending. After all, the most beautiful designs often emerge from life's unraveling threads. In her tiny apartment, Sweet Queen began to sketch. Not fashion, but truth. Every design that had brought her here, every inspiration, every late night and early morning. She would fight, not just for herself, but for every dreamer who dared to believe talent and hard work could triumph over privilege and power. And in his office, high above the city, Rupert Franklin began making phone calls. He had built an empire playing by their rules. Perhaps it was time to write new ones. The storm was here, but they had learned to dance in the rain. Now it was time to learn how to fight in it. Chapter 6. Shattered Trust. Paris in autumn painted the city in shades of gold and crimson, but Sweet Queen barely noticed the beauty around her. 3 weeks had passed since she'd left Manhattan, accepting the sudden offer from Maison Laurent, one of Paris's most prestigious fashion houses. She told herself it wasn't running away, it was strategic retreat. Her tiny apartment in Montmartre offered a view of Sacré-Cœur, its white domes glowing in the morning light. Sweet Queen sat at her makeshift design table, surrounded by sketches and fabric samples, but her eyes kept drifting to her phone. No messages, no calls, no paper cranes. The headlines had been brutal. Rising designer's success built on lies. Franklin fashion empire scandal, CEO's romance clouds judgment. Each story twisted truth into poison, suggesting her entire career was built on stolen designs and falsified credentials. What hurt most wasn't the accusations. She had documentation for every design, every sketch, every moment of inspiration. What cut deepest was the silence from the man who had danced with her in the rain, who had shared secrets over ramen, who had seemed to see her soul. "He's protecting the company," Aisha had said during their late-night video call, "the board's threatening to remove him if he intervenes." "He's protecting himself," Sweet Queen had replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Now, in the gentle Parisian morning, she forced herself to focus on her work. Maison Laurent had given her carte blanche to create, recognizing that the controversy in New York would only add mystique to their brand. Fashion thrived on scandal after all. Back in Manhattan, Rupert Franklin was waging a different kind of war. His office had become a command center, screens displaying financial data and email trails. Kai worked tirelessly beside him, following money trails and connecting dots. Vesper's been clever, Kai admitted, rubbing tired eyes. The evidence against Sweet Queen is circumstantial but damaging, and the Thorn Industries connection... Keep digging, Rupert's voice was steel. Everyone leaves tracks. Even Vesper. His phone lay silent on his desk, Sweet Queen's number still on speed dial. 1,000 messages composed, none sent. How could he explain that his silence was protection? That speaking out now would only feed the flames Vesper had so carefully kindled? The paper crane Sweet Queen had left him sat on his desk, wings slightly crumpled from the many times he'd unfolded and refolded it. Her words haunted him. Some storms we have to weather alone. But did they? Across Paris, Sweet Queen was discovering that creativity could bloom from pain. Her new collection took shape, darker, deeper, more complex than anything she'd created before. Each piece told a story of betrayal and resilience, of love and loss, of storms weathered alone. C'est magnifique, her new mentor Maurice breathed, watching her work. Such passion, such pain, très authentique. Sweet Queen's hands moved steadily, needle and thread dancing across fabric. She had learned early that creating beauty was the best revenge against ugliness. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper from every stitch. They can take your position, ma chérie, but never your gift. The days fell into rhythm. Work, create, try not to check her phone. Explore Paris's hidden corners, sketch in tiny cafes, pretend her heart wasn't still in Manhattan. She made friends among the other designers, young artists who saw past headlines to the truth in her work. But nights were harder. In darkness, memories flooded back. Rupert teaching origami to children, his laughter echoing through her tiny apartment, the way he looked at her as if she contained entire universes. In New York, Vesper's triumph was turning bitter. She had expected Rupert to crumble, to come crawling back to the safety of their social circle. Instead, he had become dangerous, methodical, focused, ruthless in a way she had never seen. He's accessing old records, Cyrus reported nervously. Financial transfers, board meeting minutes from years ago. Let him look. Vesper's smile didn't reach her eyes. The paper trail is perfect, but perfection, as any designer knows, often reveals the artifice beneath. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday. Kai burst into Rupert's office, tablet in hand. Found it. The money trail. Vesper's been embezzling for years, using Sweet Queen's department to cover the transfers. When Sweet started asking questions about budget discrepancies, she had to be discredited, Rupert finished. The pieces clicked into place. Vesper's sudden interest in Sweet Queen, the carefully orchestrated scandal, the Thorn Industries connection, get me everything and call the board. In Paris, Sweet Queen was preparing for her first show with Maison Laurent. Her collection, titled simply Storms, had created buzz throughout the fashion world. Rumors swirled. Would she address the scandal? Would she reveal the truth about Franklin fashion empire? The morning of the show, she found a paper crane on her design table. Her heart stopped, then raced. But the folding was different, feminine. Inside, in Aisha's handwriting, truth is coming to light. Hold on, sister. Attached was a financial report, proof of Vesper's schemes, of Sweet Queen's unwitting role in uncovering years of fraud. But it wasn't this that made her hands shake. It was the last line. He never stopped fighting for you. Look up. Sweet Queen raised her eyes to find Rupert Franklin standing in her studio doorway, looking both powerful and uncertain. His suit was wrinkled from the overnight flight, his hair disheveled, but his eyes held entire stories. "I should have danced with you in this storm," he said simply. The studio fell silent, Parisian designers holding their breath. Sweet Queen stood perfectly still, her mother's voice in her head. The heart knows its own truth. "You're too late," she said softly. "The show starts in 3 hours." "I know." Rupert stepped forward, holding out a familiar object, her first design sketch, the one that had caught his eye years ago. "I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to watch you soar." The air between them crackled with unspoken words, with hurt and hope tangled together. Outside, rain began to fall on Paris's ancient streets. "It's raining," Sweet Queen observed, her voice carefully neutral. "So it is." Rupert's smile was tentative. "I seem to remember someone teaching me how to dance in the rain." The first smile in weeks tugged at Sweet Queen's lips. "As I recall, you needed quite a bit of practice." "Then perhaps we should practice now, before the storm ends." Their eyes met across the studio, across oceans of hurt and misunderstanding, across all the words they hadn't said. The choice hung between them, to remain safely separate or to risk dancing in the rain again. Sweet Queen thought of her mother's words about storms and strength, about love and courage. She thought of paper cranes and thrown shoes, of laughter in community centers and truth in simple ramen shops. Outside, Paris waited in the rain. Inside, two hearts beat in uncertain rhythm, wondering if shattered trust, like broken fabric, could be rewoven into something stronger, more beautiful for its mending. The storm wasn't over. There would be explanations needed, trust to rebuild, wounds to heal. But as Sweet Queen took one step forward, then another, she remembered. Sometimes the most exquisite designs come from embracing the chaos, from letting the storm reshape what was into what could be. Rupert held out his hand, a question in his eyes, and in the gentle light of a Parisian morning, surrounded by the collection born from their separation, Sweet Queen made her choice. After all, they had learned to dance in the rain once before. Perhaps it was time to learn again. Chapter 7. Oceans Apart. The Maison. Laurent fashion show transformed Paris's Grand Palais into a cathedral of light and shadow. Sweet Queen's collection, storms, dominated the runway, each piece telling a story of separation and survival, of love lost and found again. In the front row, Rupert Franklin watched with pride and regret warring in his heart, seeing their story woven into every design. The final piece brought tears to seasoned critics' eyes, a gown that seemed to capture the exact moment when rain meets light, when storm clouds break to reveal stars. As Sweet Queen took her bow, their eyes met across the runway. 3 months of silence dissolved in that glance, but the path back to trust would not be so simple. Backstage was chaos, photographers calling for quotes, buyers waving contracts, fashion editors demanding interviews. Through it all, Sweet Queen moved with quiet grace, answering questions about her inspiration with careful honesty. "Art comes from truth," she told Vogue's editor. "Sometimes we have to weather storms to find our authentic voice." Rupert waited patiently at the edges of the crowd, watching her shine. When the last reporter finally left, he approached with 2 paper cups of coffee, one made exactly as she liked it. "You remembered," she said softly, accepting the cup. "I remember everything," he replied, "including how many sugars you take in your coffee when you're stressed. And you've been stressed for months because of me." The backstage area emptied gradually, leaving them alone among the racks of her triumph. Sweet Queen touched a sleeve of the rain-inspired gown, its fabric catching light like water. "Not because of you," she corrected. "Because of choices we both made." You chose silence to protect your company. I chose Paris to protect my art. I chose wrong. Rupert's voice was rough with emotion. I should have fought openly, consequences be damned. Instead, I tried to play their game, gather evidence quietly, and I lost something far more precious than a company in the process. Sweet Queen sat on a nearby makeup chair, suddenly tired. The adrenaline of the show was fading, leaving raw truth in its wake. "Tell me everything," she said. "From the beginning, no more protected truths." So he did. The story spilled out. How Vesper had been embezzling for years, using Sweet Queen's department as cover. How questioning the budget discrepancies had made her a target. How Vesper's father on the board had threatened to destroy the company if Rupert defended Sweet Queen publicly. "I thought I was protecting you by staying silent, gathering evidence legally," he finished. "I didn't realize silence could do more damage than any scandal." Outside, Paris nights painted the sky in watercolor blues. Through the Grand Palais's glass roof, stars emerged one by one, witnesses to truths unfolding. "I have my own confession," Sweet Queen said finally. "I could have stayed and fought. Coming to Paris, part of it was running away, not from the scandal, but from how much it hurt to think you believed them even for a moment. I never believed them. Not for a second." Rupert knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. "I believed in you from the moment you threw that shoe at my head. I just failed to show it when it mattered most." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Your timing needs work, both with doors and with declarations." "Then let me practice now." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a paper crane, not the precise fold she remembered, but something new. "I made this on the flight here. 14 attempts before I got it right. Like everything important in my life, it took practice to find perfection." Sweet Queen unfolded it carefully. Inside, in his distinctive handwriting, was not just an apology, but a plan. Evidence against Vesper, proof of Sweet Queen's innocence, and something more. A vision for transforming Franklin fashion empire, with her designs leading a new ethical fashion movement. "You want me to come back to New York? I want you to do whatever makes your art soar," he corrected. "If that's Paris, I'll find a way to split my time. If it's New York, we'll build something revolutionary together. If it's somewhere else entirely, I'll learn to fold paper cranes in a new city." Sweet Queen stood, walking to the window. Paris sparkled below, offering dreams and possibilities. But New York held its own magic. Community center, children learning art, paper cranes appearing on desks, rain dances on city streets. "When did you know," she asked suddenly, "that Vesper was behind everything?" "The numbers never lined up," he admitted. "But Kai found the proof 3 weeks ago. The board meeting is tomorrow morning. Vesper and her father don't know we've traced everything. Yet you came to Paris first. Some things matter more than business." The simple truth of it hung between them. Sweet Queen thought of her mother's words about storms and strength, about love that weathers tempests and emerges stronger. "There's something you should see," she said finally. Leading him to her private studio, she unveiled her next collection, designs that spoke not of storms survived, but of light after darkness, of trust rebuilt stronger for its breaking. "These are beautiful," Rupert breathed, understanding the message in every stitch. "When did you start these?" "The day your first paper crane appeared on my desk in Paris last week." She smiled at his confusion. "Did you think I wouldn't recognize your folds, even unsigned? I wanted you to know you weren't alone, even if I couldn't be here openly yet." "I knew." She touched the designs gently. "These pieces, they're about forgiveness, about learning to dance in the rain again." Rupert's phone buzzed. Kai, with updates about tomorrow's board meeting. The real world intruded, reminding them that their story wasn't just about them anymore. "Come back with me," Rupert said softly. "Not for the company, not for vindication, but for us. Help me build something worthy of your art." On one condition, Sweet Queen's eyes held a familiar mischief. No more business meetings in fitting rooms. I solemnly swear to knock first. He laughed, then grew serious. Always, on every door, literal and metaphorical. She stepped closer, close enough to see the hope and fear mingled in his eyes. And if I need time, if trust needs to be rebuilt slowly, then I'll wait. I'll fold 1,000 cranes, learn 1,000 dances, knock on 1,000 doors until you're ready. Paris whispered around them, a city that had sheltered her heart while it healed. But healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant growing stronger at the broken places. I have a show tomorrow, she said, in New York. The board meeting isn't the only thing happening at 9 a.m. Understanding dawned in Rupert's eyes. You were coming back anyway. Maison Laurent is opening a New York branch. They want me to lead it. She smiled. Apparently, scandal makes for excellent publicity. And us? Sweet Queen took his hand, leading him to the window. Rain had begun falling, gentle and cleansing. Dance with me. They moved together on her studio floor, Paris rain painting patterns on the windows. No music played except the rhythm of their hearts finding synchronicity again. I'm still angry, she whispered against his shoulder. I know, and hurt. I know that too, and I'm not fully ready to trust again. Then we'll practice, he promised. Like dancing in the rain, like folding cranes, like building something beautiful from broken pieces. Outside, Paris prepared for dawn. Inside, two hearts began the delicate work of reconstruction. Tomorrow would bring its own storms, board meetings and fashion shows, public vindication and private healing. But for now, they danced in the rain shadows of Paris, letting the city of light illuminate new possibilities. Their love story had weathered its first real storm, emerging different but perhaps stronger for the tempest. After all, the most exquisite designs often come from embracing imperfection, from letting light shine through the cracks of what was broken. Sweet Queen and Rupert had learned this truth separately. Now it was time to learn it together, one dance, one paper crane, one rebuilt trust at a time. Dawn painted the sky in promise as they planned their return to Manhattan. Sometimes love means crossing oceans to find your way home. Sometimes it means learning to dance in the rain all over again. And sometimes, in the end, it means discovering that home isn't a place at all. It's the space between two hearts, brave enough to try again. Chapter 8. Truth and Reconciliation. Manhattan's skyline emerged through dawn mist as their private jet descended. Sweet Queen watched the familiar spires take shape, her hand unconsciously seeking Rupert's. In her other hand, she clutched a portfolio containing both evidence of her innocence and designs that would reshape the fashion industry's future. Ready? Rupert asked softly. Understanding this homecoming meant facing more than just Vesper's schemes. Almost. Sweet Queen reached into her carry-on bag, removing a familiar shoe, the one she'd thrown at him so many months ago. I thought we might need this for luck. Rupert's laughter broke the morning's tension. I wondered where that went. I searched my whole office for its mate. Oh, I have that too, she smiled. A girl never throws away good shoes, even when she throws them at CEOs. Their car wound through awakening city streets. New York had changed in her absence, or perhaps she had changed. Either way, the city felt both familiar and strange, like a dress altered to fit a new season. The Franklin Fashion Empire building loomed ahead, glass and steel reaching for clouds. Inside, two meetings would shape their future, the board gathering to hear evidence of Vesper's crimes, and Sweet Queen's presentation of her revolutionary new collection to Maison Laurent's New York team. Different elevators, Sweet Queen said firmly when they reached the lobby. I need to do this part alone. Rupert understood. They had learned in Paris that rebuilding trust meant respecting boundaries, allowing space for individual strength. He squeezed her hand once, then headed for the executive floor where Kai waited with their carefully gathered evidence. Sweet Queen found Aisha waiting in the design studio, surrounded by their old team. The reunion was emotional. Tears and hugs and rapid-fire updates about everything she'd missed. Vesper's upstairs, Aisha reported. Looking smug as ever. She has no idea what's coming. Let her enjoy these last moments. Sweet Queen began unpacking her designs. We have more important things to focus on. The collection she revealed left her colleagues breathless. During her Paris exile, she had created something unprecedented. Designs that combined African traditions with French haute couture and American innovation. Each piece told a story of resilience, of cultures meeting as equals, of beauty emerging from conflict. This isn't just fashion, she explained, touching a particularly intricate piece. This is revolution. Ethical sourcing, sustainable practices, inclusive sizing, and profit sharing with artisan communities. Maison Laurent is ready to change the industry. The question is, are we? Upstairs, a different kind of revolution was unfolding. Rupert stood before the board, his presence commanding attention even from those who had tried to destroy him. For years, he began, this company has prided itself on innovation and integrity. Today, we face a choice about who we really are. Vesper's smile remained fixed, but her eyes betrayed uncertainty as Kai began presenting evidence. Bank transfers, doctored reports, years of systematic fraud exposed in clinical detail. Impossible, Vesper's father interrupted. These records were destroyed. Were they? Rupert's voice held steel. Or did you just assume no one would look in the right places? Your daughter was clever, but she forgot one thing. And what's that? Vesper's composure cracked slightly. Sweet Queen. Rupert activated a screen showing design department budgets from the past 3 years. She has an extraordinary eye for detail. When she noticed discrepancies in her department's numbers, she didn't just accept them. She started asking questions, the right questions. The evidence was irrefutable. Sweet Queen's meticulous records, combined with Kai's financial forensics, exposed years of corruption. Vesper's face transformed from confusion to fury as her schemes unraveled. You're choosing her, she spat at Rupert. That immigrant nobody over your own class, your own kind. I'm choosing integrity, Rupert corrected. Something you might want to consider while explaining this to the SEC. As security escorted Vesper and her father out, Rupert received a text from Sweet Queen. Ready when you are. They met in the place where it all began, the fitting room on the 12th floor. Sweet Queen stood before the mirror where they'd first locked eyes, but this time when Rupert entered, he knocked. Proper manners at last, she teased, but her eyes were serious. How did they take it? About as well as expected. The board has called an emergency session to elect new leadership. Kai is handling the legal details. He moved to stand behind her, both their reflections clear in the mirror. How was your presentation? Maison Laurent loved it. They're giving me complete creative control of the New York branch, plus a seat on their ethics board. She turned to face him. I'm not coming back to Franklin fashion. I know. His smile was gentle. You've outgrown us. That's why I'm stepping down as CEO. Sweet Queen's shock registered before understanding dawned. The new ethical fashion initiative you mentioned in Paris needs a CEO who understands both business and art, someone who can bridge worlds. His eyes held hers. Kai will run Franklin fashion better than I ever did. I want to build something new, with you if you'll have me. Outside, rain began falling, a gentle summer shower that painted the windows with possibility. Sweet Queen thought of all the moments that had led here, thrown shoes and paper cranes, Paris nights and New York dawns, trust broken and rebuilt stronger. Dance with me, she asked. They moved together in the fitting room where their story began. No music needed but the rain and their hearts. Through the window they could see their city washing clean, ready for new stories to unfold. "There's something else you should see," Sweet Queen said finally. Leading him to her old design space, she unveiled one last sketch, a wedding dress that combined all her influences: African patterns, French elegance, American innovation, and something uniquely them. Paper cranes were embroidered subtly throughout the design, and at the hem, if you look closely, you could see tiny pairs of shoes. "Is this a design or a prophecy?" Rupert asked softly. "Let's call it a possibility," she smiled. "One we can work toward. After all, we have a company to build first, and trust to rebuild, and dances to perfect." Their laughter mingled with the sound of rain rising above the city noise. Below, Vesper was led through the lobby in handcuffs, her empire of lies finally crumbling. But Sweet Queen and Rupert barely noticed, too absorbed in planning their future. The design studio gradually filled with their team: Aisha and Kai, the community center children who had become their unofficial focus group, even Thalia, who had helped gather evidence against Vesper. They all saw what was emerging, not just a new company, but a new way of doing business, of creating beauty, of telling stories through fashion. "To new beginnings," Kai raised a coffee cup in toast. "To truth," Aisha added. "To dancing in the rain," Sweet Queen and Rupert said together, sharing a smile that held promises of all the dances yet to come. Outside, New York sparkled in the aftermath of rain. Inside, surrounded by designs that would change the industry and people who had become family, Sweet Queen and Rupert began writing the next chapter of their story. It would not be perfect, nothing worth creating ever is. There would be challenges to face, trust to strengthen, dances to learn. But they would face it together, armed with paper cranes and proper knocking etiquette, with shared dreams and separate strengths, with love that had weathered storms and emerged stronger. After all, the best designs often come from embracing imperfection, from letting love shine through the cracks of what was broken. Sweet Queen and Rupert had learned this truth separately in Paris. Now they would learn it together in New York, one dance, one design, one day at a time. And somewhere, Sweet Queen's mother smiled down on her daughter, who had learned to stand tall through storms, who had found love that respected her strength, who was building something beautiful from life's unraveling threads. The future beckoned, full of possibility. They were ready to dance toward it together. Chapter 9. Justice Served. The media storm that followed Vesper's arrest rocked Manhattan's elite circles. Headlines screamed of fraud and betrayal, of millions embezzled and careers nearly destroyed. But in the eye of this hurricane, Sweet Queen and Rupert found unexpected peace, building their vision of ethical fashion while the old world order crumbled around them. Their new offices occupied a restored textile factory in Brooklyn, its brick walls and wooden beams holding centuries of fashion history. Sweet Queen had transformed the space into a creative haven, where traditional artisans worked alongside modern designers, where innovation met heritage in every stitch. "It's perfect," Rupert said, watching her arrange mood boards in what had once been the factory's main floor. Sunlight streamed through restored windows, catching the gold threads in her latest designs. "Though the board thinks I'm insane for leaving Franklin Fashion." "Are you having doubts?" Sweet Queen pinned another sketch to the wall, this one showing a fusion of African batik with sustainable techwear. "About leaving?" "Never." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, both of them reflected in the massive design mirrors. "About whether I deserve this second chance. Sometimes." Sweet Queen turned in his embrace, her eyes serious. "Second chances aren't about deserving, they're about what you do with them." Their moment was interrupted by Aisha bursting in, tablet in hand. "You need to see this," she announced, pulling up a video feed. Vesper just held a press conference. Their former nemesis looked perfectly polished, even in designer prison orange, her makeup flawless as she faced the cameras, but her words carried poison. "While I regret my actions," Vesper's voice dripped false sincerity, "we must question a system that forces such desperate measures. When immigrants with questionable credentials can rise to positions of power." Sweet Queen felt Rupert tense beside her, but she squeezed his hand. Let her talk. Truth doesn't need defense. And indeed, Vesper's attempted character assassination backfired spectacularly. The fashion world, already embracing Sweet Queen's innovative ethical fashion movement, rallied behind her. Orders flooded in for their first collection, and traditional artisan communities worldwide reached out for collaboration. "Success is the best revenge," Aisha noted with satisfaction, showing them the latest sales projections. But Sweet Queen was already sketching something new, inspired by the morning's events. "Not revenge," she corrected, "revolution." Her new design combined protective symbols from various cultures, African adinkra, French fleur-de-lis, Native American dream catchers, into a pattern that spoke of unity and strength. Watching her work, Rupert was reminded again why he'd fallen in love with her creative spirit. The day unfolded in a whirlwind of meetings and decisions. Their ethical fashion initiative was growing faster than anticipated, demanding constant attention to detail. Sweet Queen insisted on personally visiting every workshop, ensuring fair wages and sustainable practices. Late afternoon found them in the community center, where their story had first shifted from antagonism to understanding. The children's art program had expanded, now including fashion design basics and cultural education. Miss Queen! Amara, now their unofficial junior designer, raced up with a drawing. "I made this for the new collection." The sketch showed a dress covered in paper cranes and tiny shoes, making both adults laugh. Some stories, it seemed, were destined to become legends. "Speaking of shoes," Rupert murmured as they left the center, "I believe you still have my hostages." Sweet Queen's eyes danced with mischief. "Insurance, in case you forget to knock again." Their playful banter was interrupted by an urgent call from Kai. Vesper's father had made one last desperate move, attempting to freeze assets tied to their new venture through old business connections. "Let me handle this," Rupert said, already reaching for his phone, but Sweet Queen stopped him. "Together," she insisted. "No more facing storms alone, remember?" They worked late into the night, their team rallying around them. Aisha coordinated with international partners while Kai navigated legal waters. By dawn, Vesper's father's attempt had not only failed, but had exposed more of his own fraudulent dealings. "Poetic justice," Kai observed, watching the sunrise paint Brooklyn's skyline. They tried to destroy what they didn't understand and destroyed themselves instead. Sweet Queen stood at the factory's huge windows, watching their city wake up. She thought of all the moments that had led here, from that first interrupted changing room scene to Paris exile to triumphant return. Each challenge had shaped them, each storm had strengthened them. Rupert joined her at the window, offering coffee made exactly as she liked it. "Penny for your thoughts." "I was thinking about paper cranes," she smiled. "About how something so simple can carry so much meaning." He pulled something from his pocket, an origami crane made from a news article about Vesper's arrest. "One door closes, another opens," she finished, unfolding it carefully. Inside, she found not just the article, but a sketch. His amateur attempt at designing their future. The sketch showed their restored factory, but reimagined as a global ethical fashion hub. Education centers, artisan workshops, sustainable innovation labs, all growing from the seeds they'd planted. Dream big or go home, she teased, but her eyes were soft. Home is wherever we dream together, he replied, even if I still can't draw to save my life. Their laughter echoed through the sunlit space, rising above the morning traffic noise. Below, the first workers were arriving, artisans and designers, traditional craftspeople and tech innovators, all part of their growing vision. News alerts kept buzzing throughout the day. Vesper's empire was truly crumbling, old allies deserting her, hidden accounts exposed, years of manipulation unraveling thread by thread. But Sweet Queen and Rupert were focused on building rather than breaking. Their first major ethical fashion show was scheduled for the following month. Sweet Queen's designs would debut alongside collections from artisan communities they'd partnered with. Traditional techniques would meet modern sustainability, creating something entirely new. "We're going to change the industry," Sweet Queen said that evening as they walked through their workshop. Apprentices learned ancient weaving techniques, while 3D printers created biodegradable accessories. In one corner, a group of community center children watched in awe as an elderly artisan demonstrated traditional beadwork. "You already have," Rupert corrected. "I'm just along for the ride." "Nonsense." She stopped at her design table, covered in sketches for their future. "You're the bridge between worlds, between profit and purpose, between tradition and innovation." "I'm just a man who learned to knock before entering rooms," he smiled, "and to dance in the rain, and to fold paper cranes until they carry messages worth reading." Sweet Queen touched the latest designs, pieces that would debut at their show. Each one told a story of redemption, of beauty rising from ashes, of love strong enough to weather storms. "Justice isn't just about punishment," she said thoughtfully. "It's about restoration, about taking what's broken and making it into something beautiful." As if on cue, rain began falling outside their factory windows. But this time, the sound brought peace rather than pain, promise rather than parting. They had come full circle, back to dancing in the rain. But now they danced not in stolen moments between storms, but in the life they were building together. A life of purpose and passion, of creativity and justice, of love that had grown stronger through every challenge. Vesper's final attempt at revenge had failed, not because they fought back, but because they had built something stronger than spite. Their ethical fashion revolution was changing lives, creating opportunities, telling stories that needed to be told. "Ready for our next adventure?" Rupert asked as they swayed together in their sunlit workshop. Sweet Queen's answer was a kiss that tasted of coffee and dreams, of storms weathered and peace hard won. Outside, the rain blessed their factory's old bricks, while inside, the future took shape stitch by stitch, crane by crane, dance by dance. They had learned that justice, like love, comes in many forms. Sometimes it arrives in handcuffs and headlines. Sometimes it grows quietly in restored factories and children's art classes. And sometimes, most powerfully, it blooms in the space between two hearts that choose to build rather than break, to create rather than destroy. The storm that had threatened to drown them had instead watered seeds of something extraordinary. Now, those seeds were growing into a forest of possibilities, spreading roots deep into the soil of their shared dreams. And somewhere, Sweet Queen's mother watched her daughter dance in the rain with a man who had learned to knock, to wait, to build, to love. She saw their vision taking flight, like paper cranes carrying messages of hope into a future bright with promise. The chapter was ending, but their story was still beginning. After all, the best designs take time to perfect, and they had all the time in the world to practice their dance. Chapter 10. Starlit Promises. 1 month after Vesper's downfall, Manhattan's fashion world buzzed with anticipation. The restored textile factory in Brooklyn, now headquarters of Sweet Queen and Rupert's ethical fashion initiative, prepared for an event that would cement their revolution. But first, they had a more personal revolution to announce. Sweet Queen stood in her design studio, surrounded by evening sketches that would debut at tonight's gala. Each piece told a story of triumph over adversity, of beauty born from struggle. Through the restored factory windows, sunset painted the sky in shades of possibility. "Everything's ready," Aisha announced, entering with an air of conspiracy. She carried a garment bag containing Sweet Queen's masterpiece, a gown designed specifically for tonight's surprise announcement. The garden setup is complete, and Rupert just confirmed the astronomers are in position. Astronomers? Sweet Queen raised an eyebrow, but Aisha just smiled mysteriously. "You'll see. Now let's get you ready for your big night." The gown, when Sweet Queen put it on, seemed to capture starlight itself. She had designed it during their darkest days, when Vesper's schemes threatened everything. Now it would witness their brightest moment. Across town, Rupert paced his office at Franklin Tower, touching the small box in his pocket for reassurance. After tonight, the tower would no longer be his professional home. He and Kai had finalized the leadership transition that morning. But first, he had plans for the rooftop garden. "Everything's perfect," Kai assured him, watching his friend's nervous energy with amusement. "The telescope is set up, the stars are aligned, literally, thanks to those astronomers you hired. And Sweet Queen doesn't suspect a thing." "What if it's too soon?" Rupert voiced his deepest fear. "After everything with Vesper." "Stop." Kai's voice was firm. "You two have weathered worse storms than Vesper could ever create. Tonight isn't about the past, it's about your future." The Franklin Fashion Empire Gala began as twilight settled over Manhattan. The rooftop garden had been transformed into an enchanted space, thousands of tiny lights mirroring the emerging stars above. Industry leaders mingled with artisans from their ethical fashion initiative, all eager to hear about the company's new direction. When Sweet Queen arrived, conversations paused. Her gown caught every light, the sustainable fabric flowing like liquid starlight. But it was her radiance that truly commanded attention, the quiet confidence of a woman who had faced down storms and emerged stronger. "You take my breath away," Rupert murmured, meeting her at the entrance. "Every single time." "Not bad for someone who once threw shoes at you," she teased, straightening his tie with familiar tenderness. They moved through the crowd together, the perfect blend of creativity and business acumen. Everyone wanted to discuss their ethical fashion revolution, but Rupert kept checking his watch, waiting for the perfect moment. Finally, as night fully descended, he led Sweet Queen to a quiet corner of the garden. A telescope had been set up, aimed at a particular point in the sky. "What's this?" she asked, curiosity sparking in her eyes. "Look," he encouraged, adjusting the telescope slightly. Through the lens, Sweet Queen saw two stars dancing around each other, their light intertwined in an eternal cosmic ballet. "It's a binary star system," Rupert explained softly. "Two stars that orbit each other, creating something more beautiful together than they could ever be apart." He paused, gathering courage. "I had it named for us." Sweet Queen turned from the telescope to find Rupert on one knee, holding not a ring, but a paper crane, the most intricate he'd ever created. "Open it," he whispered. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the crane. Inside, in his distinctive handwriting, was their story. From thrown shoes to paper cranes, from Paris exile to triumphant return. And at the end, a question that would begin their next chapter. "I thought about doing this traditionally," Rupert said, voice rough with emotion. "But nothing about us has ever been traditional. You came into my life like a perfect storm, throwing shoes and expectations out the window. You taught me that true strength isn't in maintaining control, but in being willing to dance in the rain." He withdrew a ring box from his pocket. The ring inside combined ethical diamonds with traditional African patterns, designed in collaboration with artisans from Sweet Queen's homeland. "Marry me," he continued. "Not because I'm a CEO or you're a revolutionary designer, but because together we create something more beautiful than either of us could alone. Like those stars up there, let's dance through life together." Sweet Queen looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the paper crane that told their story. She thought of all the moments that had led here, the accidental meeting, the thrown shoes, the paper cranes appearing on her desk. She thought of storms weathered and trust rebuilt stronger. "You still need to practice your crane folding," she said finally, tears and laughter mingling in her voice. "Good thing we have a lifetime for you to improve." "Is that a yes?" "Yes," she pulled him to his feet. 1,000 times yes. Their kiss was witnessed by stars above and friends below, as cheers erupted from hidden observers. Aisha and Kai emerged from their hiding spots, champagne ready for toasting. The community center children, secretly invited for this moment, scattered paper cranes and rose petals. The night became a celebration of not just their engagement, but everything they'd built together. Their ethical fashion initiative was revolutionizing the industry. The Franklin fashion empire, under Kai's leadership, would continue supporting artisan communities worldwide, and their new venture would combine their talents in ways that would change fashion forever. Later, as the party continued below, they danced in their quiet corner of the garden. Sweet Queen's dress caught starlight while Rupert hummed their favorite song. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Beyond words," she replied, "though I do have one condition for accepting your proposal." "Name it." "We get married at the community center," she said, "where we first really saw each other, where our revolution really began." "Perfect," Rupert agreed, "though maybe we should clear the shoes from the aisle first, for safety." Their laughter rose to join the stars, their stars dancing overhead. The future beckoned with new adventures, new challenges, new opportunities to create beauty from life's fabric. After all, the best designs, like the best loves, take time to perfect. And they had all the time in the world to practice their dance under starlit skies. Chapter 11. Vows and Violins. Dawn painted Manhattan in shades of promise, golden light touching the community center's restored facade. Inside, Sweet Queen stood before her mother's favorite mural, now expanded to include paper cranes in flight against a backdrop of African patterns. Her wedding dress, months in the making, told their story in every stitch. Layers of hand-beaded lace flowing into traditional motifs, sustainable materials shaped by artisan hands. "Mama would be dancing in heaven today," Zara whispered, adjusting her sister's veil. The intricate lace had been handwoven by women from their homeland, each pattern carrying meaning passed down through generations. Sweet Queen touched the fabric gently, remembering her mother's words about love that builds rather than breaks. The center's transformation took her breath away. Children's artwork decorated the walls alongside professional designs, paper cranes hung from restored beams, and flowers from their mother's village filled every corner. But most striking was the aisle, lined not with traditional petals, but with pairs of shoes, each representing a different artisan community they now partnered with. Aisha entered, carrying something old, a delicate silver bracelet that had belonged to Sweet Queen's mother. "She wore this at her own wedding," Aisha said softly, fastening it around Sweet Queen's wrist. "Said it was blessed by generations of strong women." Zara stepped forward with something new, a necklace of paper cranes cast in ethical gold, Rupert's wedding gift. Each crane held a tiny message, their story told in precious metal and promises. Maven appeared, grinning as she held out something borrowed, the very shoe that had started their story. "Thought you might want this for luck," she winked. though try not to throw it at him during the ceremony. Finally, Amara, their youngest designer, presented something blue, a traditional indigo fabric sash made by their Nigerian artisan partners. The dye had been crafted using ancient techniques, the pattern speaking of love and prosperity. Sweet Queen touched each item with reverence, feeling the weight of stories they carried. Through the windows, she could see guests arriving, not just Manhattan's elite, but artisans and craftspeople from around the world, community center children and their families, all part of the tapestry they'd woven together. In another room, Rupert adjusted his tie with uncharacteristic nervousness. His suit, a masterpiece of ethical fashion, incorporated traditional techniques from multiple cultures. Kai watched with amusement as his friend fiddled with already perfect cuffs. The mighty CEO brought low by a wedding tie, Kai teased. Remember when you faced down that hostile takeover without breaking a sweat? This matters more, Rupert said simply, then smiled. Though I'm mainly worried about tripping over all those shoes in the aisle. Sweet Queen's idea? Of course, a reminder of our beginning, but also a symbol of our mission. Each pair tells a story of communities empowered, traditions preserved. Music began floating through the halls, not traditional wedding marches, but a fusion of African drums and classical violin, another bridge between worlds. The children's choir they'd sponsored began singing in multiple languages, their voices rising pure and clear. Sweet Queen's father arrived, resplendent in traditional attire, his eyes filled with tears at the sight of his daughter, so like her mother in strength and grace. Ready, my queen? The ceremony blended traditions like their fashion lines blended cultures. They exchanged vows under an arch of paper cranes, each made by someone whose life they'd touched. Rupert's vows included a promise to always knock first, making their guests laugh through happy tears. I promise, he said, voice strong with certainty, to dance with you in every storm, to fold hope into every challenge, to build dreams beside you rather than for you. I promise to love not just who you are, but all you dream of becoming. Sweet Queen's vows were woven with proverbs from her homeland, speaking of love that strengthens through testing, of hearts that beat in harmony while maintaining their own rhythms. I promise, she responded, to create beauty from whatever life gives us, to dance with you in rain or shine, to remember that the strongest designs come from threads that maintain their integrity while weaving together. I promise to love not just your strength, but your willingness to learn new dances. The exchange of rings included a traditional blessing in Sweet Queen's native tongue, the words echoing off walls that had witnessed their first real connection. Each ring was crafted from ethically sourced materials, designed to tell their story in precious metal and stone. Then came their first dance as husband and wife. But as they moved to the center of the room, rain began falling outside. Sweet Queen's eyes met Rupert's with familiar mischief. Without a word, they led their guests into the garden. Under spring rain that felt like blessing, they danced, first alone, then surrounded by their community. Children twirled with abandonment, elegant guests kicked off designer shoes, and paper cranes somehow stayed perfect despite the shower. The celebration continued into evening, fairy lights twinkling through the rain. Their cake, created by a women's cooperative they supported, told their story in sugar and spice. Paper cranes and shoes, African patterns and French flair, all sweet and surprising. Sweet Queen changed into her second dress, a flowing creation that caught the breeze like moonlight on water. When Rupert saw her emerge, he stopped mid-conversation, mesmerized all over again. "Remember when I thought you were just another arrogant businessman?" she teased, straightening his bow tie. "Remember when you threw a shoe at my head?" he countered, pulling her closer. "Best aim I've ever encountered. It led me straight to your heart." she whispered against his lips. Late in the evening, they snuck away to the fitting room where it all began. The same mirror that had witnessed their first meeting now reflected their joy, their past and future merging in its silver surface. "Full circle," Rupert murmured, properly knocking before entering. "Not a circle," Sweet Queen corrected. "A spiral. We keep coming back to important places, but always moving forward, always growing." They could hear their guests celebrating below, fashion icons dancing with community center kids, artisans teaching traditional moves to socialites, cultures and classes mixing like threads in a perfect fabric. The rain blessed their celebration like sweet memories falling from the sky. Inside, two hearts beat as one, ready to write the next chapters of their story together. Their love had weathered storms, bridged worlds, and created revolution disguised as fashion. Now it was time for new adventures, new dances, new dreams to unfold like paper cranes taking flight. They had learned that love, like truly ethical fashion, takes time and care to create, but when done right, both could change the world, one stitch, one dance, one heart at a time. The fitting room mirror reflected their joy, their past and future merging in its silver surface. Sweet Queen and Rupert held each other close, knowing that while this chapter was ending, their greatest adventures were just beginning. After all, the best designs, like the best loves, keep evolving, incorporating new elements while honoring old traditions, growing stronger with each challenge, more beautiful with each adaptation. And somewhere, Sweet Queen's mother smiled down on her daughter, who had found a love worth throwing shoes for, worth dancing in rain for, worth building dreams with. A love that, like the paper cranes still hanging in their garden, had folded life's simple moments into something extraordinary. The celebration continued below, but in their private moment, Sweet Queen and Rupert simply held each other, grateful for wrong turns and thrown shoes, for storms weathered and trust rebuilt, for all the perfect imperfections that had led them here. Their love story had begun with an accident, grown through adversity, and blossomed into revolution. Now it was ready for its next transformation, not an ending, but a new beginning, as all the best love stories are. The rain fell like music, and they danced to its rhythm, knowing that every step forward would be taken together. Every new design would be created in partnership. Every storm would be weathered hand in hand. This was their masterpiece, not just their wedding or their ethical fashion empire, but the love they had built, stitch by stitch, dance by dance, heart by heart, a love that, like the best fashion, would never go out of style. Chapter 12. Midnight Magic. The private helicopter glided through star-studded skies, carrying Sweet Queen and Rupert toward their honeymoon paradise. Through the window, the first glimpse of their destination took her breath away. A secluded island villa emerging from tropical darkness like a dream made real. Thousands of lanterns lined pristine beaches, creating patterns that mirrored the constellations above, each light placed with loving precision. "Welcome home, Mrs. Franklin," Rupert whispered as they descended. He had kept their destination secret, spending months collaborating with local artisans to create perfect romance. The villa combined luxury with cultural authenticity. Traditional architecture enhanced with modern comforts, every detail curated for their first night together. Sweet Queen's fingers entwined with his as they followed the lantern-lit path toward their sanctuary. Her second wedding dress, designed for dancing and celebration, caught moonlight with every step. At the threshold, Rupert turned to her with eyes full of love and mischief. "I believe tradition requires me to carry you across," he smiled. "Just remember to duck," she teased. "I'd hate to start our marriage with another head injury." Their laughter, soft and intimate, floated into the tropical night as he swept her into his arms. This time, he remembered to duck, carrying her smoothly into their honeymoon haven. Her breath caught at the sight. every surface adorned with gardenias, her favorite flower mentioned once months ago. Their sweet scent filled the air, mixing with ocean breeze and anticipation. Hundreds of candles cast intimate shadows across walls, decorated with artworks from their global artisan partners. Rose petals created paths through the rooms, leading to different areas of discovery. But the terrace held the greatest surprise. A private table for two, set with champagne and delicacies from both their cultures. In Sweet Queen's place, setting lay a handmade sketchbook filled with Rupert's amateur attempts at fashion designs, one for each day of their Paris separation. "I may not be a designer," he said softly, watching her trace his awkward sketches, "but I never stopped trying to create something worthy of you." She pulled him close, their first kiss as husband and wife in their private paradise, tasting of champagne and promises. The night stretched before them, full of possibility and passion. They shared an intimate dinner, feeding each other carefully chosen delicacies that honored both their heritages. Between bites, they exchanged tender kisses and loving glances, letting anticipation build. Sweet Queen excused herself to change, emerging in a negligee she had designed specifically for this night. Silk and lace combining traditions from both their cultures, subtle origami patterns worked into the fabric. Rupert's breath caught at the sight of her silhouetted in candlelight. "Dance with me," she whispered, drawing him toward the moonlit terrace. The ocean provided their music, waves keeping perfect rhythm with their hearts. They swayed together under tropical stars, remembering their first dance in New York rain. But this moment was just for them. Private, precious, perfect. Their kisses deepened as they moved together, passion building like waves against tropical shores. Every touch wrote new stories on willing skin. Every caress sealed promises too deep for words. They took their time exploring and expressing, letting desire build naturally between tender moments and passionate embraces. The villa offered multiple settings for romance. They walked hand in hand on private beaches, champagne making them languid and loving. The infinity pool beckoned, its waters illuminated like liquid sapphire. They swam under stars, playful splashing turning to intimate embraces. Later, the master suite welcomed them, a sanctuary of luxury and romance. Rose petals decorated the king-sized bed, while sheer curtains danced in the ocean breeze. Candlelight created an intimate atmosphere perfect for their first night as husband and wife. Time seemed to pause in their paradise as they discovered each other anew, every moment adding another thread to the tapestry of their love story. Dawn found them wrapped in silk and satisfaction, watching the horizon paint itself in shades of promise. The ocean serenaded their contentment, while early birds began their morning songs. Sweet Queen traced patterns on Rupert's chest, feeling his heart beat steady beneath her fingers. "Happy?" he asked softly, playing with her hair. "Beyond words," she replied, then smiled mischievously. "Though you still need practice with your sketching." "Fortunately," he pulled her closer, "we have a lifetime for me to improve." Their first full day as husband and wife began with breakfast served on their private beach. They fed each other tropical fruits and pastries, unable to stop touching, to stop smiling. Between kisses that tasted of mango and passion fruit, they planned their future, dreams of family, expansion of their ethical fashion empire, places they wanted to explore together. They spent hours discovering their island paradise, finding hidden coves and secret gardens. Every location became special, marked by kisses and caresses, by whispered promises and shared dreams. The day passed in a perfect blend of intimacy and adventure, each moment more precious than the last. Evening found them back on their terrace, watching another spectacular sunset. Sweet Queen wore his shirt, Rupert wrapped in sheets, both completely comfortable in their shared intimacy. The future waited with new adventures, but this magical time had laid foundations for all that would come. Ready for real life? Rupert asked, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. This is real life, Sweet Queen replied, turning in his arms, just with better lighting. Their laughter rose to join starlight, a private joke between lovers who had learned to dance in rain and shine. Tomorrow would bring return to their mission, their revolution disguised as fashion. But tonight was still theirs, to love, to laugh, to dream together. And in the privacy of their honeymoon villa, under stars that had witnessed their engagement and now blessed their marriage, Sweet Queen and Rupert began writing the most beautiful chapter of their love story. After all, the best designs take time to perfect, and they had all the time in the world to practice their intimate dance. My beautiful family, before you leave, please don't forget to subscribe. If this video touched your heart, stay with us. How will you find us again in this vast world? So many distractions, so many imitations. But here you are home. Here you are loved. Don't let us lose each other. Subscribe now and be a part of this beautiful family forever.